The German battleship Gneisenau, after making her way through the treacherous waters of the English Channel and surviving numerous air, sea, and land attacks, arrived in home waters on February 12, 1942, with only minimal damage, at least in comparison to what she was to receive in less than 2 weeks. On the night of February 13th, Gneisenau passed through the Kiel Canal and went immediately into drydock at the Deutsche Werke in Kiel. Gneisenau was loaded with ammunition in drydock on the night of February 26th. That night, she suffered a single bomb hit from an RAF bombing raid, striking the forecastle and detonating against the armored decks, causing a chain reaction below A turret in the magazine where all the powder went up into a fireball, killing 112 of her crew. The fire effectively ended the ship's career, as she was transferred from Kiel for repairs and reconstruction, including the possible replacement of her guns with 6 38cm or 15-inch guns. The conversion work ended in January of 1943 when Hitler ordered all repairs and conversion work stopped. Subsequently, her guns were removed to be used as coastal batteries. The Hulk was sunk as a block ship in harbor in March of 1945. The ship was scrapped after the war, with the remainder of the Hulk raised in September of 1951 and scrapped. I know I've said similar things in the past, but it's been some time, and specifically with this video, there's some conflicting information. So as a disclaimer, I am not a historian, I do not have a degree, and I have never claimed to be one. I do my best to select sources, of which a majority of them are secondary sources, and therefore I use my best judgment to sift through the information they present. I will always try my best to give you all factual information, and specifically in this video, I will try to give you the conflicting information to help show the full picture. With all that being said, let's continue. The Gneisenau, having entered service on May 21, 1938, equipped with 9 28cm or 11-inch guns and 3 triple turrets, being part of a 2-ship class with their sister ship Scharnhorst, the namesake of the class. A little over a year later, at the start of the Second World War, the ship was ready for operations. In November of 1939, she and Scharnhorst sorted as part of a plan to draw away British forces from the South Atlantic in the Admiral Graf's Bay, in the process sinking the auxiliary cruiser Rawalpindi. Following her return to Germany, she went on to assist in Operation Nordmark, a brief sortie into the North Sea, and then Operation Weser-Übung in April of 1940, encountering the British Battlecruiser Renown, scoring several ineffectual hits on the British ship, while taking several hits herself, requiring repairs. After mine damage in May was repaired, she was ready for Operation Juno in June, where Gneisenau, Scharnhorst, the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, and destroyers went to attack Allied ships in Norwegian waters. The latter ships were forced to break off to refuel, leaving the battleships to sail on their own. They found the carrier Glorious and her 2 escorts, Ardent and Acosta. The little destroyers attempted to attack the battleships with their 4.7-inch guns and torpedoes, but the battleships were too much and the 2 were sunk. Although Scharnhorst was struck by a torpedo in the engagement, Glorious was struck many times by the 11-inch shells of both ships, sinking on the evening of June 7, 1940. In a later sortie in June, she was struck by a torpedo from a British submarine, causing a hole to be torn in the bow so wide that a 100-man picket boat could go through it. Being forced back to Norway and returning to Germany for repairs in late July. After repairs and an unsuccessful attempt at a sortie, she tried again with Scharnhorst in January of 1941 for Operation Berlin, the first breakout into the Atlantic by German battleships, where they spent the next several months attacking Allied shipping all around the Atlantic. During the 18,000-mile voyage, the 2 ships sank tens of thousands of tons of Allied shipping. Eventually, by late March, the ships were forced into the port of Brest. In her time in Brest, Gneisenau was struck multiple times by British bombs and torpedoes. Gneisenau and Scharnhorst were joined by the Prinz Eugen after the failure of her sortie with Bismarck. The ships were to remain in Brest until February of 1942, where under the command of Vice Admiral Ciliax, the ships were ordered to return to Germany for them to be stationed in Norwegian waters. On the 11th of February, the ships set off from Brest with destroyers and E-boats as a screen, along with a rotating cover of Luftwaffe aircraft for support in case of air attacks. In the coming hours after the ships had been detected in the English Channel on the morning of the 12th, attacks from bombers, torpedo bombers, motor torpedo boats, motor gunboats, coastal defense guns, and destroyers came. These attacks have been discussed in a previous video, besides the destroyer action. The 6 destroyers of the 21st Destroyer Flotilla based out of Harwich consisted of Vivacious, Campbell, Mackay, Worcester, Whitehead, and Walpole, led by Captain Pisey aboard HMS Campbell. The destroyers, having cleared the minefields, caught up with the German ships off the Dutch coast late in the afternoon. Dividing his forces into 2 groups, Pisey launched several ineffectual torpedo attacks as both German ships and aircraft overhead attacked the British destroyers. the attack only managed to cause the German ships to take evasive action and sustain no damage from these attacks at all. In this action, some of the British destroyers were left heavily damaged, but still afloat and able to return to Harwich. The British effort to lay mines caused damage to both Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Gneisenau also hit an underwater wreck, causing further damage. Though damaged, she was able to make it to Brunsbüttel, where she anchored for a few hours in company with Prince Eugen, then sailing for the Kiel Canal and onto Deutsche Werke in Kiel. This is where information starts to differ about the ship. Some sources, like battleships of the Scharnhorst class, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, the backbone of German surface forces at the outbreak of war by Gerhard Koop and Klaus-Peter Schmolke, have this to say. On February 13th, Gneisenau passed through the Kiel Canal and went immediately into drydock at the Deutsche Werke. Kriegsmarine standing orders prescribed that before a shipyard layup or entering dock, a warship must discharge her stock of ammunition, but for reasons that have never been explained, Gneisenau went into drydock with her shell rooms and powder magazines full. Less than 2 weeks later, this error would prove fatal. Presumably, the original purpose of the drydocking was merely to allow a surveying of the mine damage before the ship was transferred to Gottenhofen for full repairs. While other sources claimed that she had been restocked, repaired, and scheduled for a deployment to Norway by February 26th. Whatever the case may be, the ship had ammunition aboard on the night of February 26th, when overhead came 49 RAF bombers which attacked the battleship in drydock. She suffered only a single hit that struck the forecastle and penetrated the upper and battery decks, which detonated against the armor deck. This explosion caused a chain reaction in the magazine below A turret. It ignited the powder in the shell cases for the ready-use ammunition. The powder went up in a great jet of flame, and the excess pressure from this lifted A turret and tossed it to the side. All members of the turret's crew were killed, and the final death toll was 112 of the crew. Catastrophic explosion was only avoided by the immediate flooding of the shell rooms and magazines. The damage to the ship was pretty severe, with the front of the ship being burnt out. Because of that, it was decided that the ship should be rebuilt and altered, namely replacing the existing 9 28cm or 11-inch guns with 6 38cm or 15-inch guns, something that had been planned and discussed previously before the start of the Second World War. Due to the circumstances of the war, it dictated that the repair and rebuilding process could not be carried out at Kiel. Instead, the Kriegsmarine decided that the ship should be moved to Danzig to complete the work, where she arrived on April 4th, under her own steam, escorted by the old pre-dreadnought Schlesien, serving as a cadet training vessel, and the icebreaker Castor on account of the Baltic being partially frozen at the time. The ship was decommissioned on July 1st, and after that, the rebuilding work began, in view of arming her with those 15-inch guns and 3 twin turrets. But the project was shelved in the early stages, as in January of 1943, Hitler ordered the cessation of all repairs and conversion work. The reason for this was because of the disastrous Battle of the Barents Sea, where Lützow and the Admiral Hipper, in company with destroyers, were to attack the Allied convoy JW-51B. Due to several factors including weather, the disposition of the German force, poor wording the operational orders, and of course the enemy escorts, resulted in a defeat for the German forces, including the destruction of the destroyer Friedrich Eckholt, heavy damage to the Admiral Hipper, and no Allied merchant vessels sunk. On January 6, 1943, a meeting was called at Führer HQ to justify Hitler's orders to decommission all heavy units and the cessation of all repairs and conversion work. In his rage, Hitler described the heavy units as worthless and useless. This order resulted in the resignation of Admiral Erich Raeder, who was replaced by Admiral Karl Dönitz, who got the order partially rescinded. However, the order for the cessation of all repair and conversion work still stood, and subsequently, the guns of the battleship were removed piecemeal for inclusion in coastal batteries. The 2 surviving triple 11-inch turrets were placed at Bergen and Trondheim, of which you can still visit Sea Turret at Ostrotfort near Bergen, while the twin 5.9-inch turrets were placed in various positions in both Denmark and the Netherlands. There were proposals for 4 of the 6 15-inch guns that were ready for Gneisenau to be placed in fortifications in Denmark, but nothing came of it. The hulk of the ship was used as a store ship in Danzig, and frequently used as an air raid bunker on account of the armor, along with other purposes. Nothing of mention occurred in 1944 as the hulk was laid up in Danzig. In March of 1945, the hulk was towed out into the harbor entrance and scuttled as a block ship as the Red Army advanced on the city. After the war, the Polish government ordered the ship to be removed from the harbor, and initial salvage operations began. These efforts would last until September 1951, when what remained of the hulk was raised and scrapped. Well, with that, the story of the Gneisenau comes to an end. She certainly had an interesting career through her various sorties and battles with ships like Rawalpindi, Renowned, Ardent, Acosta, and Glorious. It would have been extremely interesting to see what the ship would have looked like in her reconstructed state, with those six 15-inch guns she was to be equipped with. What do you all think about her reconstruction, and how would the change affect the ship's overall usefulness as a commerce raider or in a battle with an allied capital ship? This brings me to another rather contentious point that I've been meaning to discuss in a video: the classification of the Scharnhorst class. Some say battlecruiser, others battleship, or even fast battleship. I tend to call them battleships, as I have done in this video, due to the fact that the Germans designated them as battleships. Still, in other videos, I've called them battlecruisers, like in my video on the sinking of Glorious. The trend in calling them battlecruisers is something that occurs in newer sources, as I have a number that describe them as such in their writings. All this to say, a discussion about the ship's classification can be interesting, and I'd love to hear all of your opinions on it. Within reason, of course. There's no need to type furious corrections, as either side has reasons, good or bad. Also, in my numerous videos on the ship, I've tried my best with pronunciations, and this one is just one I struggle with, as a number of other native English speakers do. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help the channel to grow, and until next time, my friends, good luck this week.